Hi, I'm Steve Dornan, and I'm one of the directors of software engineering here at Life360. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about Life360's family safety product and how we're using real-time geospatial analytics to make everybody's life better at Life360. A couple of things that we're going to talk through. We're going to talk about the use case, some of the reasons why we need to do these analytics, what the deciding factors were, and most importantly, some of the lessons that we learned in rolling this out through our organization. So some of you will be familiar with Life360 as an application. Some of you won't. So let me just talk a little bit about the value that Life360 brings to everyday life. Right now, we have, as of December 2024, 79.6 million monthly active users, and that's growing at an annual rate of about 32 to 35% year over year. It's a consistent growth. We continue to see it. So that puts us, I would say at this time of the year, somewhere in the range of 88 to 90 million monthly active users, the majority of which happen to be in the United States, but our international audience is growing as well. I mean, obviously, we're audience capped in the US at about 370 million, but there's 8.5 billion other people on the planet who have families who need this. And the most important thing is we focus on complete family protection. So not only location safety, knowing where your loved ones are, but driving safety, crash detection, SOS alerts, digital safety, and for hopefully not a lot of families, emergency assistance. If we detect a crash, we immediately dispatch emergency services in the countries in which we have partnership agreements. A few years ago, we also bought one of the best companies in Bluetooth trackers, Tile, and made them part of the Life360 brand. They're great. You can attach them to backpacks, your wallet, kids, keys, even your TV remote. And new feature that was added this last release was now you can initiate an SOS alert discreetly and directly from your Tile device without ever having to open your phone. Rounding out our product family, we also bought GeoBit. And we last year announced GeoBit for Pets as a beta so that you can, with the Life360 app, protect the things, the people, and the pets that you love most. And then probably the most exciting is we recently announced a partnership with Hubble Network. Hubble Network is creating a network of satellites around the globe, similar to products you've heard like Starlink, that creates a groundbreaking capability that's never been had before, which is being able to detect Bluetooth devices from orbit. This eliminates that whole problem with range on a Bluetooth device. And normally you get 65 feet or so away from your phone and your headphones don't work anymore, right? Well, with the Hubble satellite network, we can detect these Bluetooth devices from orbit. Currently, there's a once-a-day satellite overpass. There's three satellites in constellation, but throughout the next 3 years, going into the end of 2028, Hubble plans to deploy around 96 satellites, creating full-time global coverage, just like some of the other satellite constellations out there. So what does this mean for our customers? You never have to worry about losing something again. You go for a hike in Yosemite. You drop your backpack, your keys, your wallet. There's no cell signal. There's nobody around with a phone that can detect it. Don't worry. The Hubble satellite network will pick it up, and you'll get notified of where your device is. So why real-time analytics? Probably one of the most important questions. At Life360, when we looked at the problem around real-time analytics, three things came to play: speed, safety, and scale. Be able to do real-time analytics, we have to have precious measured in seconds, not minutes, not hours, not days. Typical OLAP analytics look at yesterday and before. We need to look at what's happening with our users now. It has to be able to fulfill really strong requirements for privacy, safety, security, and it's got to scale to grow the way that we do. If you look at our history, we started out, let's just go back 5 years. In 2020, we were just over 26 million monthly active users. At the end of 2024, 80 million. And that's a 30% year over year. And if that keeps on pace, that means by the end of 2027, we'll have 150 million monthly active users. keep that trajectory of 30% year over year growth. And I think you can do the numbers on how much data we're going to have in our system. And it's got to be able to save us money over traditional storage. It's got to have tiered storage and efficiency. Another element that comes into play in trying to figure out what's the right solution here is our volume of data. Every single one of our devices have different strategies for emitting its location. Tile devices, if it's home and it's passive and you're inside your Wi-Fi, it's every quarter hour it's going to send a blip out so that you continue to know where that device is. Once you get out of your home network and you start moving around, about every 5 minutes, it will emit a location. And then we also have our Finder network, which is deployed as part of our Life360 app, which means you also have 80 million devices in the wild that are constantly looking for tile devices. And every single time a Life360 phone runs across one of these tile devices, it sends its location back. So we end up with a large volume of bursts of locations as we get into densely populated areas. Then we get to the phones that Life360 is installed on. In passive mode, again, you're home, you're not moving around, you're sleeping. About every 45 seconds, it'll update the system. When you're active, you go for a walk around the block, that updates to about every quarter hour. When you start driving, now it's every 15 seconds. And if mom needs to see where her son or daughter are, and she opens the application and goes into what we call focus mode, where she's looking directly at her son, that'll send a message through the back end that will cause her son's phone to start emitting locations every 2 seconds. Now we add in the Hubble Network. As those satellites pass above us in orbit, every time they run across a device, a Bluetooth tile device, it's going to pick that up and send it back to us. So this results in, now, I'm going to be clear on this. These numbers are only our phones. It's not taking into account our devices or the Hubble network. We currently store 85 plus billion locations per day. We have a pretty circadian rhythm throughout the day and the week, and then we have a pretty high seasonality in our data. So we can fluctuate between 400,000 and 700,000 locations per second, and that's growing at the same pace that our monthly active user base is growing. And all of that is even before we add Hubble. And that feature is only going to add to this volume and expand the problem geometrically. So what are some of the deciding factors? When we think about the criteria for real-time data architecture, one of the things that comes to mind is the SLA that it has to be able to achieve. Some people refer to it as a blink of an eye responsiveness, which is typically about 1 second. We are talking in wink of an eye, 80 to 90 milliseconds. We have very, very tight, very high service SLAs between our cloud backend and our mobile app. We have to achieve anywhere between 100 and 125 milliseconds for round trip on a service. That means the database has to respond in 80 to 90 milliseconds. Scale to tens of millions and hundreds of millions of global users. It's also got to be able to handle consumer-driven query volume. As we expose the analytics capabilities and the real-time component to not just our internal consumers, but our customers themselves, this is going to mean significant bursts in the amount of queries that are going to go against the system. It's got to have a high rate of ingest. With data emission rates ranging between 2 seconds and 15 minutes per device, and there's hundreds of millions of these things out there, we have to be able to handle a very high rate of ingest. And it's got to have massive storage for that global user base. We've got to be able to support geospatial indexing, and it has to support strong data privacy and security. The geospatial indexing is particularly important when we start thinking about tracking trips. One of the most important features in the Life360 app is being able to go back and look at the history of any trip that you've taken in the last 30 days. And the way that works is there's a bunch of meters on the phone that determine when you start driving, when you stop at a location, how long you stopped at a location, and when you end your drive. And all of that data has to be stitched back together. And it's a very complex process. And again, focusing on data privacy and security. We believe in only you and the people that you have said are allowed to, i.e. the people in your circle, can see your data. We very strongly believe in the do not sell my personal information. That's why we have the setting in the app. And we obscure people's data to prevent snooping. Right now, there is no way to draw a straight correlation between an individual user and a given location. When we present points of interest information, we scrub out anything that has to do with schools, hospitals, churches, or any other sensitive location. And we always apply to GDPR, California, New York, federal, and other global data privacy codes. So now we start talking about Apache Pinot and StarTree Cloud. Pinot at its base level met our performance and scaling requirements, but StarTree is really what we needed to be able to get there, bringing a fully managed service, additional levels of security over the application, and feature sets that are not largely available in the open source platform. So our current data architecture is something that looks familiar to almost anybody who's in this industry. We have our mobile clients who talk to our application servers, which talk to our current set of databases, which are distributed across the back end. And then there's an analytics platform that sits on top of that stale data. To be able to do what we need to do, we needed a new architecture. So that's, again, keeping the mobile clients talking to the app servers, but now we inject Apache Pinot and StarTree into the mix. And that gives us the capability to do real-time analytics. So what did we learn in deploying StarTree in our environment? First, we learned there's a use case for upserts and tiered storage. With the number of locations that we have today and it being a constantly flowing stream of information, and today we currently in Apache Pinot only keep the last known location. The last year's worth of locations are stored in our data lake. There is a case for keeping up to 24 hours of upserts into the tables so that we always know the most current location of any given user in the system. StarTree gives us tiered storage on S3, which makes the finances a lot more acceptable to an organization. And the managed Apache Pinot provides ingest time reconciliation and off-heap structure to lower memory pressure. And we're still scoping the work because there's still more data that we need to add to this platform. Other lessons we learned, one of the things that we didn't take into account was how complex it was going to be to deploy StarTree in our environment. This is the first time that Life360 had ever engaged in a bring your own cloud type of scenario where it would be fully managed by an outside company. So we had to spend a significant amount of time kind of harmonizing our security policies across StarTree and Life360 ecosystems, and then manage the VPC peering so that it could talk to our backend could talk to it, but only the parts that were allowed to talk to each other. This created new problems that we had to solve and new InfoSec policies that we had to develop. We had to configure this for cost optimization. Once we got it up and running, the POC was done in 3 weeks. We hooked it up to the stream of data and it just started flowing, and we had data saturation within 1 week. So within 7 days, we were able to ingest all of the last known locations for all 80 plus million of our customers. And we say that we had to do backfilling of data, but there was really no need to do that once once we had the database saturated. So this is one of the biggest lessons I think that we learned was how long it was going to take just to get the core system set up. So that's our story. That's what we've done here at Life360. Thank you for listening in and have a great day.